All right, so you want to dive into stress and blood pressure. Buckle up, because this is a big one.
Yeah, it really is. You've given us a lot to unpack here.
We're talking American Heart Association, Mayo Clinic, even some stuff from the Cleveland Clinic.
Lots to dig into.
You want to know if all those crazy deadlines and that traffic jam you sit in every day are actually, like, secretly messing with your heart?
It's a worry a lot of people have.
Yeah, and after going through all this research, well, you're not alone in wondering.
Not at all.
Okay, so picture this. You're staring down a deadline at work, the clock's ticking.
I can feel my heart rate going up already.
And suddenly your heart's doing a drum solo you definitely didn't sign up for. Sound familiar?
Oh, yeah. That's your body's, like, ancient alarm system going off. Usually called that the fight or flight response.
Fight or flight.
Yeah, and it's not just in your head either. It's a real physical surge of hormones, adrenaline, things like that. It's the same response that, helped our ancestors outrun saber-toothed tigers and whatnot.
So we can thank fight or flight for our ancestors surviving.
Exactly. But I'd say it's triggered more by emails than predators these days.
Yeah, I don't think my inbox is going to jump out and bite me.
Hopefully not.
But it can feel like that sometimes. Okay, but this is where it gets kind of interesting. Because all these sources, especially the American Heart Association, they're very clear about one thing. That sudden jolt of stress you get, like almost getting sideswiped on your way to work,
Oh, yeah, I know that feeling.
that's acute stress. And yeah, it sends your blood pressure up, like on a roller coaster for a minute. But your body usually bounces back pretty fast.
It's like a sprint for your nervous system,
Hmm.
in and out. Chronic stress, though, that's more like a marathon, and that's where its impact on blood pressure is.
Well, it's where things get a bit fuzzier.
Right, it's not so clear-cut.
Exactly.
So, get this. I was reading an article from Medical News today, and it said that stress itself, stress alone, it doesn't directly cause chronic high blood pressure. Hypertension, as the experts call it.
Interesting. So it's not a direct link? Not directly, no. It definitely caught me off guard when I read that.
That is a common misconception.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just assume stress equals high blood pressure.
Right, they go hand in hand. And, well, it's not that simple.
Okay.
But here's the catch. While stress isn't like personally handing out hypertension diagnoses, it can push us towards, let's say, behaviors that do have a VIP pass to higher blood pressure.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, stress is like a puppeteer.
Up a tier. How so?
Well, it's subtly pulling the strings of our choices, you know? At least that's how it feels sometimes.
I see what you mean. You're onto something there. And actually, the Cleveland Clinic highlighted a study that found people who said they were under a lot of stress, it was something like 60% more likely to do what the researchers called frustrated eating. Basically, reaching for those comfort foods.
Oh no, comfort food, you mean?
High in fat, tons of sugar. And you probably already guessed it, salt. And all that salt.
Not good for the blood pressure.
Exactly. It's like a one-way ticket to higher numbers on that blood pressure monitor.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm hearing is stress itself might not be the direct cause, but it can definitely lead us down a path where all those bad habits take over. And then those habits, those are the things that directly impact blood pressure.
That's it. It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. It's like a chain reaction.
And it's not about, blaming ourselves for that extra cookie or skipping the gym when we're stressed. It's just about understanding that this domino effect is happening so we can make smarter choices.
That's right. It's about being aware of it.
Awareness is key. And what's really fascinating? Even just how we think about stress, how we each interpret a situation, that plays a part too.
So you're saying like two people could be facing the exact same deadline at work,
Same amount of pressure,
and one person's totally chill, maybe even doing a little meditation at their desk,
finding their zen.
and the other person is about to climb the walls.
Two completely different reactions.
So it's not just the stress itself, it's also how our brains react to it.
That's exactly it. And that actually leads perfectly into why it's so important to figure out what coping mechanisms work best for us as individuals.
Because we don't all deal with stress in the same way.
Not even close. Some people might reach for a stress ball, others might need a walk in nature.
And some of us might be eyeing that bag of chips.
Hey, no judgment here. But we'll dive into those sneaky culprits, and believe me, there are a few, a little later.
Oh, there are always sneaky culprits.
Always. But before we do that, I'm curious, what stood out to you from all this research? Anything make you really stop and think?
You know, one thing that really stuck with me was this study from the Mayo Clinic. They found that even just thinking something is stressful, like just believing that, can set off that whole fight or flight response in your body.
Oh, wow. So, like, our bodies are reacting even if there's no real danger?
Yeah, it's like our brains jump the gun sometimes, like handing out fight or flight invitations even when, there's no party.
The brain can be a little dramatic sometimes, but I guess that also means we might have more control than we think we do. Right. If our minds can make stress worse, maybe they can help us manage it too.
Okay, but before we get too zen about it all, let's talk about those sneaky culprits we mentioned earlier. We know stress can lead us to some bad habits, but what are we really talking about here?
Well, all the usual suspects showed up in these articles. Overeating, especially those high-fat, high-sugar comfort foods.
Ooh, comfort food. I can see where that's tempting.
Right. And then there's hitting that snooze button on exercise.
Hmm.
And, well, maybe pouring a glass of wine or two, or three, to unwind after a long day.
You're speaking my language. Is it bad if I'm like really craving a cookie right now?
Listen, we've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, never letting yourself enjoy things. It's about understanding why those cravings tend to pop up when we're stressed. Like, for example, salt. Ever notice how you crave salty snacks when you're stressed?
Totally. Potato chips, pretzels, all the good stuff.
Exactly. But the British Heart Foundation, they pointed out that eating all that extra salt can make your body hold on to water. And that puts extra pressure on your blood vessels.
And pressure on blood vessels means?
Higher blood pressure, exactly.
So it's like this chain reaction. One unhealthy habit kind of leads to another, and our blood pressure is caught in the middle.
Exactly. It's a domino effect. And speaking of domino effects, let's not forget about sleep. Or should I say, lack of sleep.
Oh, sleep deprivation. That's a big one.
Huge. The Cleveland Clinic really emphasized this. Getting enough sleep, like a solid 7 to 8 hours, it's not just about feeling well rested. It's about giving your body a chance to regulate those stress hormones. Cortisol, for example.
Cortisol, right. That's the stress hormone.
That's the one. And when you don't get enough sleep, your cortisol levels can go haywire.
Okay, so we're stressed out, not sleeping well, reaching for the cookie jar instead of the treadmill. This is starting to sound a little too familiar here, and not in a good way. This is like a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say disaster, but it's definitely not doing us any favors.
There's got to be some good news in all of this, right? We can turn things around, can't we?
Of course we can. And the good news is that all these articles are also full of really practical ways to manage stress and get back on track with our health.
Okay, phew. I need to hear this. So what do we do? Give me the tools.
Think of it like building a stress-busting toolkit. And one of the most powerful tools in there, social connection. The American Heart Association really emphasized that.
So spending time with people we care about actually helps.
Big time. Nurturing those relationships is like a secret weapon against stress.
It's true. Sometimes just calling a friend can totally turn my whole day around.
Right. Laughter is seriously good medicine. And speaking of feeling good, we can't forget about exercise.
Oh, come on. You're not going to tell me to go for a run when I'm stressed, are you?
What if I told you it could actually help?
I'd say, prove it. But seriously, I'm all ears.
Even just a little bit of exercise, like a quick walk around the block, it releases these things called endorphins. Those are like your body's natural mood boosters.
Yes.
And of course, regular exercise helps you manage your weight, it strengthens your heart, can even improve your sleep quality.
Okay, so it's like a win-win all around.
Exactly. Remember those domino effects we talked about earlier? This is the good kind. One healthy choice can lead to another.
I like the sound of that. So, what about mindfulness? That seems to be all the rage these days. Does it really live up to the hype?
Mindfulness is more than just a buzzword. There's actual science behind it. The Mayo Clinic talked about things like yoga and meditation and how those practices can actually calm down your nervous system, lower those stress hormones we talked about, and even help you sleep better.
Wow, so finding these little pockets of peace throughout the day, like taking a few minutes to just breathe or something, that can actually make a real difference.
You got it. It's about giving your nervous system a chance to chill out, to step away from that constant state of high alert.
Okay, I can see that. And speaking of breaks, what about actual sleep? The kind where you're actually unconscious for a while. We've got to talk more about that.
We do. We've already touched on how important those 7 to 8 hours are for keeping those stress hormones in check. But it's worth repeating. Sleep is crucial.
Sleep is definitely underrated. It's like hitting the reset button on your whole system. But all of this, the exercise, the mindfulness, the sleep, It makes you realize that we actually have some control over this stuff. We're not just helpless victims of stress, you know?
Hmm.
We've got tools. What else can we add to our stress busting toolkit? So we've got our friends and family. We're promising ourselves we'll actually exercise. We've even downloaded a meditation app. But what about those times when, like, all that stuff isn't quite cutting it? Some of these articles mention medication. Is there a place for that in all this?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
For some people, medication might be part of the solution. And it's not, a sign of weakness or anything. It's about working with your doctor to find what works best for you.
Right. Like, it's not about just slapping a Band-Aid on the problem. It's about finding the right combination of things to manage your blood pressure for the long haul.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between lifestyle changes and, if you need it, some medical support.
Hmm.
One article, I think it was from the Cleveland Clinic, it talked about things like beta blockers and how those can help with some of the physical symptoms of stress, like if your heart's always racing.
So it's like even if you do end up needing medication, it's still important to address those underlying causes, too.
Absolutely. It all comes back to taking care of your whole self,
Hmm.
mind and body.
It's all connected.
Exactly.
You know, one thing that really resonated with me from all these articles was this idea that you don't have to do everything perfectly overnight. It's those little changes you make consistently that can make a big difference in the long run.
100%. Sustainable change. It's not about being perfect. It's about progress.
It's about taking those baby steps and, maybe swapping out the chips for some fruit every now and then.
Or taking 5 minutes to just breathe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up our deep dive on stress and blood pressure, any final words of wisdom for our listeners, something for them to think about as they, continue on their stress-busting journeys?
We've talked a lot about those not so great habits that tend to pop up when we're stressed. But what if, instead of reaching for the cookie jar or whatever your vice is, you did something positive for yourself? Like, what if you picked up a paintbrush? Or went for a walk? Or called a friend to just, laugh for a while?
Ooh, I like that. Turning those stress triggers into something positive.
Exactly. It's about remembering that we have more power than we think we do. We can choose how we react to stress. And those choices, they really can make a difference over time.
So it's not about eliminating stress completely. It's about choosing how we respond to it.
Exactly.
That's a great point to end on. I love that.
I'm glad.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive on stress and blood pressure. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope this has given you some things to think about and maybe even inspired you to prioritize your own well-being.
And remember, it's a journey, not a race. Be kind to yourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Hmm.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.